Are you sick and tired of going through the same types of conflicts and arguments and disagreements over and over again in your relationship, but finding it really hard to break out of that cycle? Well, something you want to understand is that securely attached individuals take a totally unique approach to conflict. And in this video, we're going to cover 7 major things they do differently that get them off of this rocky path in their relationships and allow them to actually become stronger because of the conflicts they have, and also allow them to properly set old conflicts to rest so they're not getting brought up over and over again for months or weeks or years, even. So, stay tuned if you want to stick around and learn how they navigate disagreements, how they maintain trust, and how they actually keep their love and spark alive through even the trickiest of times in relationships. My name is Thais Gibson, if you're new to this channel, and I'm the founder of the Personal Development School. I created the Personal Development School after healing my own attachment style, and I'm here to share those different powerful tools with you. I ran a client-based practice with a very long wait list, about 2-year wait list, for the better part of the past 10 years or so. And on this channel, we talk a lot about the subconscious mind, attachment styles, reprogramming techniques, and tips for really empowered and thriving relationships. So let's talk about these 7 things. My goal for you is that by the end of these 7 components we're going to cover, you'll walk away having a totally different idea about how conflict works and some really powerful pointers to keep in mind when you're in those heat of the moment kind of situations so that you can break the pattern, break the cycle, and do something different that's going to create different results for you in your life. So, one of the first things that securely attached people do is they prioritize maintaining connection. Securely attached people actually prioritize the emotional connection with their partner over prioritizing their pride. So they actually have this certain degree of humility they bring into their arguments where they're willing to be open minded, they're willing to try to listen to what their partner is saying. Part of this is because compared to insecurely attached styles, they have less core wounds because they literally have less wounding and less trauma from childhood, which means they're less likely to take conflict personally. But by trying to soften when we're in conflict and trying to take the approach of like, okay, what can I learn? What are the takeaways? How can I try to maintain connection with my partner? It allows us to try to do conflict differently. And I think sometimes people get afraid that if we're too soft during a conflict, that we won't get hurt or we won't get our needs met. But, after working with so many couples, I can tell you it's quite the opposite. The more we can maintain that sort of softness in the relationship when we have those heated conversations, and the more we can actually come back to a space of saying, okay, I hear you. I hear why you're hurt. I can understand. Or if you don't understand, ask to understand more and validate somebody, then we can still bring it back to us, right? I think people are afraid of being weak. And so they feel like they have to come on so strong to get heard. But usually the more, aggressive we are, the more defensive somebody comes rather than the more able to listen somebody is. And so when we can hear somebody else out, validate where they're coming from, and then say, okay, look, I've heard you out. I really need you to see my perspective now. I really need you to hear where I'm coming from. Here's what hurts me in this situation. Here's what I need in the future. When we can do that, we can maintain connection, but we can also, and that really brings me to that point number 2, we can have the ability to communicate our truth, right? But do it in a vulnerable way. I always say to people in the personal development school, communicate vulnerably about what hurts you. It's one of the only ways you're actually going to get heard. I think that we miss the fact that sometimes people take things so personally when we're being defensive or when we're emotionally dysregulated because it's in our nature to do that. That we miss the important points, right? We miss the ability to really learn and grow from what each other is saying. Okay, so prioritizing and maintaining connection over trying to be right or trying to focus on pride, and being able to share your truth from a vulnerable perspective so you can actually get heard are points number 1 and 2. Number 3, securely attached people, they don't sweep things under the rug. They tend to be quick to repair. And it doesn't mean that you won't have, for example, an experience where your partner's saying, I'm really frustrated right now. I need some time to gather my thoughts and to cool off. Securely attached people can absolutely be in that space, but they're not going to leave things for, the whole day, overnight, not going to bed angry, not going to leave things for weeks and weeks or days and days. or just shove things under the rug and never talk about them. So they will tend to try to hash out what the problem is so that the resentment doesn't stay building and boiling between people. I really think that resentment in relationships is like poison. The more of it you're carrying, the more likely your relationship is to eventually fall apart. And we can make sure that we don't carry resentment in our relationships by actually talking about what's going on. Okay. By actually being able to hash things out. And I want to share something really important here. When we hash things out and we validate each other, like let's say, for example, somebody upsets you, when you can have a conversation where you each talk about why you were upset, what you want to do differently next time, and you can validate each other's emotions around it. Like, I get your side. I see where you're upset. Okay, I'll work to do this differently next time. Okay, here's my side. Okay, you understand my side. I see what you're going to do differently next time. Once we work through our feelings and needs around conflict, we tend to feel largely resolved. And this brings me to point number 4, which is that when people bring up conflict over and over again, and they're bringing up an argument from last week or last month, it's actually a symptom of feeling like that conflict has not properly been resolved. And I've often had clients come and say things like, Thais, my partner always brings up this argument from months ago or from a year ago. Like, why do they bring it up? I'm so sick and tired of, why can't they leave the past in the past? And what I would always do is get them to sit down and be like, let's hash out this conflict once and for all. Why do you keep bringing it up to the partner? What needs are not met yet? What fears are not resolved yet, or what feelings have not been validated yet? And once we covered those 3 things in the communication process, the partner who was bringing things up over and over again would finally set things to rest once and for all. So when this is happening, securely attached people see and understand that if you're bringing things up over and over, it's because there hasn't been resolution yet. So let's find a way to dig into it a little bit more and resolve it so we can actually leave it in the past where it belongs. And what this really means is that securely attached people are good at validating each other's feelings, seeing each other's viewpoints, the same sort of theme that's threaded throughout all these different points so far. So that is point number 4, being able to actually set conflict to rest by understanding that if we bring things up over and over, it's a symptom of not being properly resolved to begin with. I will say as well, if you're like, well, how do I do this validation of feelings? How do I do this communication around these different things? I'll put a link down below. It is for completely free access just for a limited time to our conflict resolution course. So I'll put that link down below. It gives you like roadmaps for conflict resolution, the steps to take if you aren't familiar with how to take them or how to hash things out and talk things through, some tips, tools, pointers, all these different things to also make sure that you are getting seen and heard in your relationships and that you feel resolved. So that's all in there. I'll put the link fully for free just for a limited time in the description box down below to our conflict resolution course at PDS. Our next big piece, number 5, is both parties do a pretty good job of being emotionally regulated during a conflict. And a lot of this comes from, again, the absence of core wounds that we talk a lot about on this channel. The less core wounds you're carrying from the past, or you've had the chance to recondition, the less triggered you're going to get, but also nervous system regulation. When our nervous systems are regulated because we've got good morning and evening habits like meditation or like breath work, or even just yoga or like walking, stretching, if we are able to feel like we are in our body and stay grounded and present, we are less likely to get emotionally destructive and really dysregulated in a conflict, which again helps things stay under control. So, if you're seeing that from each of these 7 points, if you're seeing emotional regulation is a really big point, I have lots of videos on this channel about how to better emotionally regulate. But it's nervous system regulation, it's reprogramming and reconditioning core wounds. And if this is something you see yourself really struggling with, it might be a good place to start because it's really hard to do some of these things if you're struggling with the emotional regulation piece to begin with. And again, just know if that is something that you're struggling with, it doesn't make you a bad person or incapable of doing relationships. It just means that generally you've been through a lot. And so there's a lot of core wounds there, and you're on high alert a lot of the time because of unresolved trauma from past experience. It's lodged in your subconscious mind, unconscious mind, and essentially body as a result. And so understanding that, but doing the work to heal it will be very valuable and empowering. Number 6, I keep mentioning this, I put it as its own point, validation of each other. Okay. So even if somebody does a behavior that you don't agree with, you can communicate very strongly about the boundary without validating the behavior, but still validating the emotions. I'll give you an example. Let's say that somebody, I would do this honestly with clients all the time, but this is a really important thing to do in your relationships. Let's say a client came in and let's say they raised their voice at their spouse. And maybe it was just for a moment and they didn't say, let's say they just got really heightened. I might interrupt and say, look, I can understand so much why you're upset right now. I see where you're coming from. It's okay that you're upset and angry. But what's not appropriate is for you to be raising your voice. It doesn't help the conversation. We can't do this here if we want to get through this particular conflict. And so I would validate the or excuse me, I'd validate the emotions without validating the behavior, right? Hey, I see that you're upset and it's not okay to raise your voice. It's not appropriate. It can't happen. So securely attached people do this very well. They can say, look, I understand that you're, overwhelmed. And so we didn't get to talk at all about this, but I have a boundary. I want to talk through conflicts. I want to, so depending on obviously whatever the situation is, they can validate the person's upset, but they can still say, and here's my boundary at the same time. And last but not least, number 7 is learning and applying key takeaways. This seems to be something that all healthy relationships do quite well, is that when we do have the conflict and there is a learning that comes out of it, like, oh, you're sensitive around topic ABC, we actually work to be mindful of that in the future, be mindful of the person's sensitivities, learn and apply the key takeaways that we learned from the conflict so that we don't run into the same patterns and problems over and over again. And I think that that's something that doesn't get discussed enough, but that has so much value in its ability to really impact our relationships. And it doesn't mean that we're going to be perfect all the time, nor should that be the expectation. But by constantly plugging away at learning and trying to grow in the relationship dynamic, just like you would if you make a mistake at work, or just like you would if you make a mistake in some sort of journey that you're on in your health journey, or, mental health journey, we want to also apply the learning of different problems and challenges from our conflicts into our relationships as a whole, so we can keep growing in a way that grows us together rather than has us grow apart. So these are really important components for what securely attached people do differently when they fight, or essentially how securely attached people fight. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to see more content about this, please let me know in the comments down below, or any questions you have. I will definitely come in here and take a look and try to create some future videos about them. And if you're newer to this channel, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing this content. I make pretty much daily videos on here. So you can subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Thank you so much for watching and for stopping by.